Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness Podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission on the podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable or transferable business value, and then for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's transferable and then exit successfully and on your own terms and conditions. The businesses that we are working with and most experienced with are services businesses and government contractors and professional services firm. We haven't done a ton of work with manufacturing and industrial firms. So that's our discussion topic this morning. It's going to be focused on the succession of industrial businesses. And our guest is Jules Brenner. Jules has a background in mechanical and aerospace engineering from New York University and has built a career in leadership and business development as CEO of Industrial Succession and Metal Solutions Holdings. His focus is acquiring and consolidating metal fabrication companies, and the focus aligns with his strategic vision to drive growth and efficiency in the industry. Jules, welcome to the podcast. We're looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, Jules, I'll start us off. So I think it's important right off the bat because listeners might just assume you're a typical PE guy, and as listeners know, the goal of PE is get into the company, drive the profitability up pretty quickly, and try to exit in 5 to 7 years at a multiple of what they paid for it. Your mission, though, is completely different. So I think it's important that our listeners understand that up front. Can you describe for us exactly how you operate and what the mission of your company is?
Yeah, for sure. So industrial succession, the mission is to find verticals in the lower market industrial sector, as they call it. So call it businesses doing less than like 50 million of revenue. And, more so where we spend our time is actually much smaller than that. Usually can be like 20 employees or less, and help those business owners that typically don't have children or lots of buyer options with a succession plan that lets them leave quickly, lets them transition to someone who is local, knows what they're doing, and most importantly, does not buy the business from a fund that they raise that has like a life cycle to it. When you raise a fund ahead of time, you promise 5 to 7 year return, as you mentioned, and inherently you're going to make short-term decisions on what you do with the owner's business. And, from our perspective, we take a little bit of a different approach. We're local. We plan to continue doing this for many decades. And very much when we're buying a business, we're buying it through the use of both our money as well as a bank loan, and aiming for the 5-year period to pay back that bank loan and then be able to get money out of the business through dividends or maybe a recapitalization rather than having to sell it at that point in time. And it allows us to invest in technology early on. It allows us to invest in people. A big part of the model too also involves buying other businesses that are local to that business and bringing their people and workforce into one building, which lets us save on costs, which lets us then further not have to sell in the 5 to 7 year period.
Yeah, Jules, so I'm going to ask you a question. It's actually on your website. Why industrials and manufacturing?
Yeah, I kind of fell in love with this stuff early on. So before I went to college, I read that the Ayn Rand book, Atlas Shrugged, and I was for some reason just enamored with all that stuff. And then I did go to school for mechanical, aerospace, and business, so kind of straddled all those worlds early on. But when I came to California out of school, I almost went into what I like to call old economy industrials, fabrication, manufacturing, like we're doing, old school service businesses. I actually instead went into industrial technology. So I was part of companies in the electric vehicle sector, trying to take really old school pockets of that and modernize it through technology. And I fell in love with the whole thing of like, take something older that needed a refresh that a lot of people were not giving attention to, and use modern tools in order to do that. At the same time, I knew that industry was slow to adopt in general, even if you presented really strong business cases on stuff. Basically one day said, this would be a lot more efficient if we just bought these businesses ourselves and then implemented these improvements ourselves and saw the businesses grow. So I feel like my job now is definitely in a domain that I love very much, in a domain that gets unfortunately overlooked. And it's also in a state, California, where it fundamentally gets underinvested on the lower market side, as they call it. So I'm really excited about driving change in that, and really excited about where the U.S. fundamentally is going with its attitude towards things like manufacturing in 2024.
When you look at a transaction, are you looking to buy 100% of a company, or are you looking to buy a portion and then partner with the existing owner?
So we're flexible for starters, but what we try to do is we have the owner leave. We like to think of the owner as our customer, right? We want every customer to be happy. We want to figure out what they're looking for. And we're willing to be custom and flexible because there isn't like this fund that we raised where we promised investors we do things in exactly a certain kind of way. So we definitely can be flexible. From the owner's perspective, we typically deal with owners that are closer to retirement age, sometimes maybe like late 50s. They want to work for a few more years and retire before 65. But at retirement age, the name of the game for them is how quickly can I leave, right? So they decide to sell. It can take a while to sell some of these small businesses before they, hear about us or whatnot. So, we've had a pretty good track record of that. The first gentleman we dealt with, he left. He actually moved out of state within 4 months. We probably could have made it happen within 3. And then the second business, the guy was 6 weeks. And then the last business, he actually was going to work on site with us for a few months, like 2 months, and then go remote and be a salesperson. So we were able to achieve that as well. So we generally, for that reason, are finding ourselves in less of call it like transactions where they leave equity in the business, and more so where there is maybe a seller note that maximizes value. Maybe there's tax things that they want to accomplish with that. So we try to do that. If not a seller note, it could be also bundled with an earnout, something that lets them, if they want to stay on, hey, keep your existing clientele. If you can get revenue out of them, plus some new customers we give you to a certain dollar amount, you get bonused based on that. And we find that that's a lot cleaner and easier to understand for owners in our market size, because we do typically deal with like less than 2 million EBIT and down. But maybe for 2 million EBIT and up, it is more appropriate with the rollover. We do have mechanisms internally where if somebody did want to sell their business and contribute some of the purchase price to the equity in our holding company for metals, they can do that as well. And we try to, we haven't done that yet, but it's the kind of mission with that is that, your business maybe spent decades servicing, let's just say aerospace of Orange County, but our holding company over time would hold metal fabrication and machining companies all over California in different verticals. So you get to kind of contribute your life's work to something bigger and have it more diversified, and let that kind of stay on. So we always leave that option open. But so far it's just been the 3 that we've done so far have all been more like non-equity earnout seller note type structures.
Yeah. So the owners who have stayed on, do they stay on in the same role, or does their role change?
Similar. So we have one owner that's kind of like a consultant for us still. He lives like 5 minutes from the facility. So he'll pop in. He's actually still the landlord. I'll probably see him around the building like once a month or something. And if there's ever a question, we pick up the phone, make a call. He's always around. The other owner who's more active, he's a full-time estimator salesperson for us, which before he was actually managing the operations and the finance and kind of like a full-blown general manager. But now all he focuses on sales, keeping the customers happy, trying to grow those accounts. We find that usually that's what owners end up wanting to do. There's some part of their general manager job that they really love, and they want to just do more of that. And typically it is not the fulfillment side. It's typically more on like the sales and, growth, top line revenue type function.
Are you limited geographically as to the types of companies you're looking at?
Yes and no. So, part of our longer term strategy by 2028 for Metal Solutions Holdings is to have at least 4 plants in major metros of California. So Bay Area, San Diego, Orange County, Los Angeles. And each of those plants, we'd like them at least doing 25 million of revenue per plant. And, based on the business sizes we've been buying, it'll probably be multiple purchases in each locale in order to accomplish that, right? It wouldn't be just one plant. So we are open from that perspective. But a lot of the synergies happen when we can buy something very local. Like it just so happens to be that the first business we bought, the first three businesses we bought were 5 minutes from each other in Orange County. There's metal shops literally on those same blocks that different verticals, but literally it's that dense in where we're at right now. So it makes a ton more sense when you buy out your neighbor rather than you go and you start, even if you have to go an hour on the other side of town. It's just so much less synergy. You can't have employees in the same place. Work can't be shared. Processes can't be shared in the same ways if they're local. With that said, we have had people start calling us about opportunities outside of California, and our rule has been is if the business is large enough to support general managers and just more room to kind of accommodate us having to get on airplanes and travel, we're very much interested. So we have one opportunity now actually in Long Island that we're talking to. That one we initially weren't jumping at, but it is sizable enough where we can make that make sense for us. So definitely really open to that. But there has to also ideally be a clear reason why we would buy on the other side of the country. Like maybe they are local to certain customers that we don't have access to here in California.
Okay, and then this was intriguing. The intent of never selling. So what is your long term end game if you never intend on selling these businesses?
We're a big fan of recaps. We think, a lot of these metal shops that we've seen in Southern California. I mean, I can't tell you how many I've come across that have been here for 100 years plus. Family owned. Sometimes it might have been sold, but for the most part, they're family owned, 100 years. So we love that. We think their custom metal fab is not going anywhere, especially in California. It's a very good thing to own for the long term, right? I don't think it's going to get disrupted by any crazy technology. Maybe production run work might, but other than that, custom stuff like what we do won't. So we love that idea. We love having that option out there. I mean, I think everyone at the end of the day has a price. If someone calls them and offers them billions of dollars for something totally not worth billions of dollars, I'm sure, people would take them up on that. So we would never like tell an owner, there's never, ever any chance, right? So, but it is very much not the intent. Everything we do. I mean, we aggressively reinvest in the front end, which is not typical from what we've seen with PE shops. Usually their motive is how do I come in and slash operational costs as fast as possible, and then do it that way. So we don't like that. But by 2028, when we go through the business plan and buy up the facilities, I think one thing that is definitely really intriguing to us is recapitalizations. I mean, we are buying businesses with assets, hard machines that banks love. And as you get to scale, it's much easier to go and do recapitalizations and pull cash out of the company that way. And then just kind of restart the debt cycle over and over. So you don't have to sell off equity shares of the business.
So, from a seller's standpoint, is it reasonable to expect that a lot of their admin people are going to be let go and you're just going to kind of absorb that function, but that their tradespeople would stay with the company?
Yeah, the so tradespeople almost always stay because you need tradespeople to produce the product. You can't trim your tradespeople down. But we very rarely run into a metal shop where there's a big set of admin people. Very, very rarely. Most of the admin people that they will have are going to be oriented towards producing the product. Managers, quality folks, production managers, those folks almost always stay. They're the ones with the legacy knowledge more than anything. I'd actually argue that they have more legacy knowledge than the welders or someone on the floor. But usually the rest of the admin team, maybe there's an office manager, and if it's the office manager is not the owner's wife, it's some outside hire. So sometimes the office manager, we have found that they have had this relationship where the owner, when the owner departs, it's almost like you lost I don't know, like a secretary you've had for years, and they just know all your ins and outs of life, and it's kind of like that. They're not a traditional one per se that one might imagine. But in the few cases that we found that the office manager is indeed incredibly knowledgeable, we want to do everything we can to keep them. We've come into some businesses where we sat there and we're like, wait, the office manager is not the actual general manager. We were shocked by it, and these are usually owners that are a little bit more passive. Maybe they're there half the week or something like that. So those we'll try to keep. But for the most part, To scale, you have to usually invest in more resources. It's usually the opposite. You're not coming in with like, how do I trim costs? But the nice thing is if you combine facilities with complementary skill sets and put them under one building, the cost savings and the synergies associated with that are substantial enough for you to not have to pull the lever of how do I trim people.
And that'd be the same, I assume, for the professional relationships. Could be a big savings there because everything would be done by your CPA, your law firm, all that stuff. And they're all very familiar with these businesses and everything.
Yeah, like with CPAs and law firms, we've never seen it where we bought a company and then the CPA and law firm the owner used or want to kind of work with us. I mean, they kind of assume that it's a move on at that point. We're going to use our own people. Which if we're going to have anywhere where like people don't work with the company anymore, that's probably where it's going to be. Sometimes it's little things like we standardize the uniform vendor, right? They're using guy A, we've been using guy B for many years. It's like that, or a janitor or something like that that's outsourced. But in terms of direct employees, it's almost not that affected. And the maybe the other place is we put in a lot of software. So software lets you actually keep the same amount of people and get more efficiency out of them, which then lets you scale better without having to keep hiring. But we do all this to go for growth. But if we were gonna like buy the business and ask ourselves how can we get more EBITDA at day zero without putting in more effort for growth, yeah, you would probably be trying to figure out how you can let people go in the office and consolidate things. But I think our mentality very much is the exact opposite of that in terms of spend and reinvest aggressively.
Yeah. So, Jules, other than being an industrial or a manufacturing company, what are some of the other aspects of a business that would make it attractive to you?
Yeah. So kind of how we start. So, I can maybe start, we have a few like verticals that we want to work on over time. Metal fabrication was really exciting to us to start because there's something like 2,500 in Southern California and 4,500 in the rest of the state. It's very, very dense with those. So we love businesses that are really dense in geography to other companies, right? Where you don't necessarily need to keep 50 brands. You can keep one brand, but really bring everything in under one roof and get economies of scale. And a lot of those business owners, they know of each other in those pockets. So when you do something like that, oftentimes they're at the minimum neutral, if not excited about the prospect of merging their brand with someone else because they get to a much bigger scale. It's like a 1+1 is 3 effect. So we like that a lot. But from there, we'll start kind of a profit and loss statement down. So we start with revenue. We look at revenue quality and what goes into revenue quality. So we would rather buy a business with a lot of revenue, really low profits than the opposite, right? We find that we can do a lot more fixing with that, and there's usually a lot more things to play with. But if you don't have a lot of flow of revenue on the top, it really chokes you out in terms of what you can accomplish. So right now, especially since we've been working on bringing resources together, buying as much revenue as possible has really been a big focus for us. Now, from there, we dissect what's in the revenue. So first, we look at the typical things like customer concentration. You're over 10%. We're going to look at that very deeply. You're a recent one-time kind of pop that's unsustainable. We're going to look at that really deeply. We're going to look at the industries that we're exposed to, as well as if the part that they're making is a capital good versus a more of a recurring item that's needed, right? We want to try to stay away from capital goods and poor economic times, unless it's something that we have to make regardless, like defense or medical or something like that. But once we get it clearer on that, and we're happy with that, we then move down to margins. And I think margins do say a lot per se, but at the same time, that's to my point of like, we would rather pay for more revenue and lower margins and try to fix the margin issue. We dissect it there and try to understand like, okay, what goes into the cost of goods sold, where are the percentages of, labor to revenue, whatever, not within standard. And because we buy metal shops locally and because we know the labor market locally, we have very strong data on all that. It's very hard to argue with us about something because we'll just pull up, a dozen SIMs or packets from prior deals we've looked at and see this is the normal ratio of percentages for a healthy metal shop. And this is what's too crazy. This is what's too low. And thereby we can back into what's feasible for us to achieve. And from there, if we're usually happy at gross margin, everything after that is typically just an operating leverage issue. If we bring plants under one roof, we can work with the SG&A expenses to get a better optimization there. But if everything from SG&A up is not good, then we're typically, we have a problem there. So that's most of where, where we'll start. I mean, there's little factors after that, like the machines that they're using, are they old? Does the owner want an unrealistic number that's going to stress the business to a point where it's no longer, we don't no longer feel good about that we're going to be successful with it, or going to run it really tight and not run it in the way we want to. Just things like that after that. But for the most part, it ends pretty much right there. And if we're happy, we'll try to make an offer on the business.
Jules, we, like Pat said in the beginning, we deal with a lot of service businesses. And one of the big issues we have is, sometimes somebody can have a very profitable business, but the value isn't as transferable as we would like because of the personal relationships that the owner has with his clients. Is that less of an issue in the manufacturing business?
That's a good question. It's interesting because when you say, like, let's say I said manufacturing, right? And if I go down there, I say metal fabrication. Even in metal fabrication, you have like the places that are like laid out and built like a production facility, and then you have places that are laid out like a garage shop. And we've definitely found ourselves more in the garage shop world. Not always, but production layouts and garage layouts are also not necessarily tied to size of revenue, right? I mean, actually, the smallest company we bought was a mini production run facility versus the largest or more garage shop. So, we've definitely we've definitely found with like a lot of these deals that the more garage shoppy they feel, the more it feels like what you just described, where the owner has a lot of the relationships, the owner is winning all the work. If the owner leaves, people are going to get squeamish. It's definitely not one of those industries where if an owner told us his whole customer list or even gave us the contact info for all their buyers, we're going to start stealing customers tomorrow. Like it doesn't work that way. A lot of them are very loyal when they know they get a product done somewhere, maybe they're 2-3 facilities. They typically will stay with that. So at the minimum, we try to find those businesses where that customer, regardless of where they who the owner is, they know that their product is difficult either to make, or there's a strong business case as to why they have to continue working with this facility. Like we have some infrastructure customers and one of our businesses that on-time delivery is absolutely paramount due to liquidation, right? The liquidation issues. They don't deliver the project on a certain day, that the city fines them tens of thousands of dollars a day when our product costs a lot less than that. So in those cases, the stickiness of the customers is a lot more consistent versus if it's there's nothing keeping them there. We're not making anything that's hard to make. We're not providing a strong business case. It's just anyone can make this product, that we're just so happen to do it at the right price. Those are pretty hard to transition and keep customers contained. But that's part of what you also want to analyze in revenue quality, right? How do you do that? There have been certain facilities we've looked at that definitely resemble more service kind of oriented culture, where the owner holds a license or something like that. Those are really tough as well. I think there's buyers lots of time will have to price adjust for that if they want to do something, or even better, if the owner can figure out a way to convince a buyer that they are going to do a slow transition. I think those things really help.
Yeah. Hey, Jules, you mentioned production shop and garage shop. Can you just differentiate between those two?
Your garage shop is going to look like you went to the automotive mechanic at your local gas station. You know what I mean? There's crap everywhere. There's no rhyme or reason why there's a wrench. If a different guy came to work in that work cell that night, he won't know what the guy from the original one, where he specifically put his wrench of this kind, whatever. They're maybe very good for cranking stuff really quickly. They're really good for running one shift and one shift only. But it's very limited on real estate, so you can't, leverage real estate better. You want to leverage real estate through multiple shifts. Versus production run is like everything is very clean. There's lines usually everywhere. There's good lighting. Every tool is marked, where it goes. There's a quality manual. There's a procedure. If the part got to a guy in a way where he wasn't unsure, there's a system and process for how he should work on it. There's a quality procedure in place to make sure nothing bad leaves the facility. Versus this garage shops just kind of pump. If it gets functional and it slightly holds within the tolerance, we're just going to move for volume here and get it the hell out of there every day.
Yeah, so I'm curious, do you see the most potential in the garage shops? Because is that where you can add the most value in regard to operational improvements and
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these garage shops, like they they have a good, usually one or two really good, usually their largest customers that those customers maybe themselves started out more R&D, they were in growth mode, they needed somebody who was nimble, and then eventually, especially in the world of M&A we live in, those guys get bought out by somebody a lot more professional, which that's happened to us. Our two largest customers right now, they're both in that exact situation. They got bought out by someone way bigger than them, way more professional. I'm talking German or Swiss level quality. And then they come down and they sit with us and they go, we need you to step it up now. And fortunately, we're ahead of the game on that one. So we're like, yes, we've already done it, right? Let's tell us what you need. So those situations certainly foster, if you bought a garage shop and you didn't do that ahead of time, you might actually just lose that customer. So they're more opportunity, but you have to be without a question willing to invest immediately back into professionalizing it, because you probably will not scale with certain customers. So
okay. We've asked you about what would be attractive. Let's say you're attracted and you get in, you start doing due diligence. What are there areas of risk that you might bump into that you might say, it's just too much risk here, or we're going to walk away, or we're certainly not going to pay as much money as we were thinking? Are there areas of risk that you might highlight that someone listening might take away and make sure they're paying attention to?
yeah, I say revenue quality. If it sucks, you can only operationally fix so much. I mean, we've seen it so many times, and like we've known other buyers in metal shops locally. They don't pay attention to revenue quality. They either buy a company that's too small, or they buy it where a bigger one or two customers can be lost, and problems start really fast. Because if you're in a tight margin business and you lose a 10% customer, that may be all of your EBITDA in one swoop. And if you've added debt to the business, I mean, you're in a real tough spot. So I think that's really important. I think the getting the business to a point where the machines are of some quality too. Like if you go back to fundamentals, where people used to, they'd buy these shops with like asset based loans. Like you want good machines there, you want good equipment, right? If you're gonna go to a buyer and try to have them buy your facility, but all your machines are on their last legs, even if historical capex is low, it's just like buying an old piece of real estate, right? Like you're not going to get top dollar for it. So I think having that part addressed a little bit is nice. I mean, honestly, the most simple thing that it blows my mind every time is if I was going to sell our facility tomorrow and I had old machines, I would at minimum pay a detail facility to come and clean everything up. You know what I mean? Just like selling an old car, like why would you not do that? You'll spend $500, whatever it is, and you'll get $1,000 back. It's just little things like that. And I think we see past that, so it's kind of our opportunity, if you will, if someone doesn't do that, just like with the car example. But I think definitely people need to also put a lot more weight into how serious customer concentration is. I don't think a lot of owners understand, because they probably did not put debt on their business when they bought it, and the new buyer probably will. And they would say like, well, I've had customers up and down over the years. Why are you concerned? Right? It happens, right? That's just business. But that's not how EBITDA works. So I think getting clear on that with owners is really important to get on the same page about risk.
All right. Well, fantastic. This has been great. Great information. Great quality content. Anything that you should mention that we haven't asked you about before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think kind of just for the listener base, I think it's really important to think back to fundamentals that a lot of people typically understand, which is selling their house or selling their car, right? If you were going to do that, what would you do to maximize value? And this is a much higher ticket item usually than the last two things I just mentioned. So I think that's really important, doing those things early on. And then also understanding that most buyers will use a bank, and most banks require 3 years of consistent something, right? So we've unfortunately had owners where their business fell out of operating leverage and they lost all their EBITDA, whatever it was, because they lost the customer. And then they, make an offer and they say, well, no, but I was worth, this last year. And we say, well, Unfortunately, if you ever want to get back to this number, we're going to either have to cut the lender out. So you're basically going to have to finance most of the deal. And if you don't want to do that, then you're going to sit here for 3 years and fix up your books. And if you want to sit here for 3 years and fix your books and hope that in 3 years they get fixed, you're welcome to do that. But we just encourage more owners to be thoughtful of that, because sometimes they get stubborn and they just say, I'm going to wait it out. But especially if you're at a point where maybe money isn't everything in life, maybe you can be more flexible with buyers. So I think those are just the biggest pieces of feedback. And buyers are not trying to necessarily offend you by putting a lower valuation. It's just, if you need a loan, you're not going to get a loan on a business that EBITDA is on the down, right? Anything else I'm happy to share as well. But otherwise, I appreciate the time.
I think we're good. That was, like Pat said, Jules, that was great. Really, really appreciate it. And it's always interesting to hear about how other industries operate. And I mean, there's, a lot of similarities, but it was really interesting to hear the nuances of the type of businesses that you're looking at. So we really appreciate it. A couple questions for you as we wrap up. Is there anything you want to promote today, and how could a listener get in touch with you?
They can reach out on either Industrial Succession's website at industrialsuccession.com or Metal Solutions Holdings. If there's any like metal, either fabricators, distributors, outside processing services, anything like that in that ecosystem that are interested in selling, we usually look for at least 10 employees and 2 million of revenue. Let us know. We are a lot more flexible, like I was mentioning, if they're larger and out of state, but if they so happen to be local and they're towards the smaller end, we're very open to that too. We do, I've done a few podcasts on the website that talk about, different things associated with this. I think in general, the listeners, if they find anything useful, I hope they have a chance to see some of the other stuff, especially in the Metal Solutions Holding site, which is a lot more geared into like the specifics of what we've done, what softwares we've rolled out, little things like that. The one thing I forgot to mention, we were cutting off at the minimum. I wish more business owners would have started the cycle of implementing software before we bought the business. Even if we didn't even use the software they had, they at least started getting their employees on that culture, which is usually the biggest hang up, not the actual implementation. So,
Hey, Jules, question about that. When you say software in regard to a CRM, or what kind of software are you talking about?
So when we go into these businesses, I mean, pretty much the day one thing is you take every piece of paper in the company, you digitize it where you can search it through OCR, and then you shred it and you get rid of it. And you try not to use paper ever again, right? You give everybody laptops, you give everybody iPads, and paper is usually the best way to not share information with everyone, and usually the best way to not have everybody get on the same playing field. So we love digital things for that. But what we do is we use off the shelf softwares all the way from lead generation, marketing to CRM to ERP to quoting software to project management software to online like QuickBooks. And then what we do is we API all of the softwares together. So we get an engineer to get them all to talk to each other. We'd rather not do it that way. We'd rather have one software that's just perfect, but this is a pretty decent solution so that you can move something from lead all the way through the process in one hit. So if more owners like started putting those things in early on, that would be a big help. We probably won't end up using the software that they have because there's billions of softwares and we're probably using something else, but it's a big help. I've seen some PE shops, what they do now is if there is an ERP system, the PE shop won't mess with it. They'll leave it alone. And then they'll build a kind of core ERP and then they'll get that to talk to the core. And then they'll just read all the data off the core. So they don't disturb employees, but then they standardize how they operate up top.
Hey, one more question that's kind of along the same lines. Do you use a PEO, and what if one of the companies that you're attracted to purchasing has a PEO in place? How does that?
Well, so we just started implementing one called Rippling, which is yeah, it's pretty robust. It has like learning management. You can run a university through there. It has employee safety incentive bonuses, and it's a billion modules built in. But we're going to go live in it by first week of October.
Jules, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been great. And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859 0860, and I'm at 301-951-9090. If you benefited from today's episode, please consider liking and sharing it on social media. And as always, thanks for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.